Today is the final day for submissions on the government's abortion legislation bill, and some parents of children with disabilities say they're concerned the bill will lead to more abortions on the grounds of disability. Parents of children with Down syndrome say attitudes have been changing since prenatal screening for disability was introduced around 10 years ago, and they're afraid people with the disability are becoming more and more a minority. Proponents of prenatal screening and the new abortion legislation say it's all about giving women information and choice. Alex Perrottet and cameraman Nick Monro went to meet some children with Down syndrome and speak with their mums.
Oh, love you. I distinctly remember that conversation, and I remember the change that happened for us because we were so excited and so delighted, and then all of a sudden it was like all of our expectations and hopes just got ripped out from under us.
Rachel Price first got to know Eden had Down's syndrome when she was born, and says she only got over the shock because she knew an adult with Down syndrome who put her fears to rest. Now she has a confident 12-year-old schoolgirl who, like plenty of her friends, plans on becoming a YouTube star.
Hey guys, this is James. Let me room tour.
I started to realise unless I was a very terrible parent, I was not going to end up having to help my child through like police issues, drug issues, alcohol issues. None of this was going to be our reality with an adult person with Down syndrome. Yeah, I started to just open up to the possibility of the adult life also being a privilege. And we're not there yet, but I always watch with glee the news reports of people with Down syndrome getting married, and I fully expect that Eden will have love. She'll move out of home because we will make her, much as we love her. You know, we've kind of put a time on it, 25. Going to be pushing you out of the nest.
Gabriel Morton-Jones is also preparing to leave the nest soon. He's turning 18, and he's the fourth of 6 children. Like any kid, he's got a range of options, but really one major passion.
So you actually like Darth Vader?
Yes.
But doesn't he do bad things?
Yes.
But you still like him?
Yes.
Is that because he looks really cool and he wears black?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
and listening to music, rock music?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Star Wars.
Star Wars?
Yep.
What, you dance to Star Wars?
Yep.
What sort of restaurant would you work in?
My own.
Your own?
Yep.
Oh, yeah? What would you call it?
Star Wars.
Star Wars?
Yep.
His mother, Helen, says like any kid, he has more to learn, but having a child with Down syndrome has taught her a lot.
Gabriel's going to be 18. And now, today, what we had is so different to what we had, say, even 20 years ago with the pace of life. I intentionally go slower, and I've learnt that from him, just every day. As it comes to you, try not to worry about the future.
Ready? Okay, now 2 hands on the front, put your foot in, swing your leg over. Good man.
Agnes Brown couldn't have children and adopted her only child, Reuben, when he was born. She says they tried many times to adopt, but the process was too hard, and they were finally successful with Reuben because they knew his 17-year-old mother.
He's awesome. He certainly has turned our lives upside down, and definitely for the better. We just love him to bits, and he surprises us most days, and yeah, we're so very blessed to have him in our lives. He's very cheeky and bossy.
Agnes says Reuben's birth mother was determined to have her baby despite considerable pressure to have a termination.
Unfortunately, her GP actually was strongly asking her to consider having an abortion and was actually giving the birth mum or the worst scenario if she decided to keep the baby, and which didn't sit very well with the birth mum, and actually dreaded having to go to her health visits because it was always brought up by the GP, and we actually applaud the birth mum for sticking to her guns and not wavering from her decision to actually adopt.
Rachel says she had a similar experience when they were expecting Eden's younger brother.
We were under immense pressure to go and have genetic counselling. Why? Because if we have another child with Down syndrome, we're quite okay with that and we will carry on with the pregnancy. And I said no, and I said no twice, and yet I still got a call from the clinic where they would have done the genetic testing to say, we've made an appointment for you. I don't want the appointment, please cancel it.
Peter Stone is a professor of maternal and fetal medicine at the University of Auckland and did a lot of the work behind the prenatal screening that was introduced around 10 years ago.
Even when I was training, sometimes the first time we knew that something was wrong was when a baby would come out and the baby wouldn't be right.
He says there's no intention to coerce women either way.
I think that's systems. I think that's people saying, oh my gosh, we have not offered this woman this. I think they feel, well, she didn't come for the screening, maybe we have slipped up, rather than thinking, well, maybe she hasn't come for the screening because she didn't want it. And what they would be better to do is actually ring her up on the phone and say, hey, we see you haven't come along for a screen. Do you want it, or actually you don't want it? And if you don't want it, then they should take her off the schedule.
But the New Zealand Downs Syndrome Association says there needs to be far more respect, and health practitioners need to be aware that there's a stigma around Down syndrome, and they should provide more information and greater support. Diane Burnett is the Auckland representative for the association and says when she had her daughter Jada 8 years ago, the social and medical pressure was intense when she wanted to opt out of the prenatal screening process.
I didn't want to have the pressure that medical professionals can put on you to terminate, and also the social pressure, perhaps. So for me, this was our baby, and we wanted this baby, and so screening was not going to make a difference.
Diane says women are just not given the full picture when they find out.
Expectant parents or mothers who receive a pre-diagnosis of Down syndrome are getting very medical and clinical information about children with Down syndrome, and figures on heart conditions and health conditions and hearing loss and eyesight problems and things like that. And I mean, people with Down syndrome are not the only people who have those issues in their life, but they're not getting, what it is actually like to have a child with Down syndrome, or they're not being fully informed about Down syndrome and what it's like.
Rachel, Helen, Agnes and other women that we spoke to say they're concerned that the development of prenatal testing has led to an assumption that women will want to opt for a termination if they find out that they're carrying a child with Down syndrome. They say that the screening option has become routine, and they also say that women aren't given all the information when they need it, and that's led to a drop in Down syndrome births. They fear that New Zealand is edging closer to what's happened in some European countries where Down syndrome has been almost entirely eradicated. Iceland has almost completely eradicated Down syndrome with only 1 or 2 births a year. It has an early prenatal screening process that's not meant to be routine, but around 85% of pregnant women go through it, and almost everyone who receives a positive result for Down syndrome decide to terminate. The New Zealand Down Syndrome Association says the ratio here has dropped from 1 in 750 births to 1 in 1,200, though those statistics are disputed.
I just find those statistics incredibly heartbreaking. Living with this child who brings us to light every day, I just feel like the world is going to miss out on something by not having Down syndrome present. And I would just hate to ever get to the space where we don't have people, like Eden anymore. I feel like New Zealand's kind of on the knife edge now. These diagnoses, when they come, they're so full of fear. There's that awful, crushing moment of, this was not in the plan, what now? And somehow I think we need to do more. Not in that moment to say, you know what, that is a horrible problem, let's just get rid of it. But to say, actually, there's a lot of hope around this journey still. And you know, and I hope that stories like ours can help other women to say, and other families to say, this life is not a horrible experience by any stretch.
Gabriel's mother, Helen, has even stronger feelings.
I think New Zealand can do better than Iceland. I feel really saddened by hearing that Iceland abort 99% of people with Down syndrome. To me, that seems like a eugenics program, and that's just madness.
Professor Peter Stone says it's completely up to the individual woman and all the information they need is at hand.
Increasingly, they're given a pretty full picture. I mean, it's fair to say every clinician is different in the way that they may interact with the woman. If you've delivered enough babies in your lifetime, you're going to see babies that didn't come out the way you expected them to come out.
Eden's mother, Rachel, has signed an open letter to the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, regarding the bill decriminalising abortion. They say in 2017 the Prime Minister promised that abortion changes would not include removing the gestational limit of 20 weeks for an abortion on the grounds of disability. The abortion legislation bill would allow abortion on the grounds of the woman's well-being after 20 weeks on the approval of one health practitioner. Disability groups say changes to the abortion law in Victoria, Australia, back in 2008 were not as liberal, yet in the following 10 years, 1,685 abortions were performed after 20 weeks on fetuses with a confirmed or suspected disability, almost a third of them for Down's syndrome. But Peter Stone says choice is paramount, and those who choose to have a Down syndrome child shouldn't be telling everyone else to do the same.
The women that choose to have a baby with Down syndrome or trisomy 18 or Turner syndrome or whatever, they can have their baby and they can be incredibly well supported by associations, and they will be well supported by the health services. And there are other women who the thought of having a child that will have some problems, greater or lesser extent, and if a woman decides that that's not for her, then that's, in our society and in the way we work, and in many societies, we accord individuals that right, and that's what it's about.
Ruben's mother, Agnes, says real choice only happens when you have all the information and assurances of support. As a woman who voluntarily sought out her son Ruben, she says she only wishes there were more opportunities for people like her to provide that support for women feeling the pressure.
Most people know that with Down syndrome that they carry the happy gene. They're always smiling, and you know they have that happy disposition. I mean, they do have their moments. They are strong-willed, and but overall, you know, for Ruben, it's very rare that he's cranky. He's always a happy-go-lucky child. And we're very fortunate. Oh, that's nice. That's a nice cuddle.